Oftentimes you're asked to address issues where you have to answer the question, is it possible that something happens? So the purpose of this video is to help you think through the issue. Was it possible that Brock Turner really thought that he had consent from Chanel Miller? So let's get started thinking it through. Let's get started by looking at a situation. Now, in this situation, we find Artie, who works as a tattoo artist at a studio downtown. This studio is located in the Party District, which is close to a number of bars and clubs, and the salon or studio is open until 2 a.m. One evening, a young woman comes into the studio with a group of her friends, and she asks to have this tattoo put on her wrist. Now, Artie, the tattoo artist, could tell that she had been drinking, but she was over 21, she was confident in what she wanted, and she signed all of the release forms. 2 weeks later, Artie was notified that he was being sued for $5,000 to pay for the young woman's tattoo removal plus pain and suffering. And for your information, pain and suffering is awarded when the action was intentional. It's a monetary punishment beyond making the action right. So to ask for pain and suffering indicates that Artie knew that what he was doing was wrong. Now, Arta, the young woman, had been at a bachelorette party that evening, and she doesn't remember anything after going to the second bar, but her friends told her what happened. They say that they were walking by the studio on the way back to the hotel, and Arta decided that she wanted a tattoo. Her friends admitted that they were all drunk and that they all encouraged her. The problem is that Arta works for a conservative financial institution in Phoenix that mandates that tattoos must be covered at all times. Failing to cover her tattoo, especially this particular tattoo, would cost her her job, so she has to have it removed. And as we all know, tattoo removal is painful and expensive. She thinks that Artie should be responsible for the removal, because he should have refused to do such a permanent procedure on a clearly intoxicated woman. She believes that the signed release form was invalid because she was drunk when she signed it. Now, I want you to think about this particular situation and to pretend that you are the judge. What is your ruling? Is Artie responsible? Or is he not? I want you to stop the video and think about this for a moment and think about your reasoning. Now, this is always a good, enjoyable situation to talk about in class because people usually line up on both sides. And they have very cogent arguments for both points of view. But what they oftentimes don't do is, first of all, take a look at what the law says. Is what Artie did illegal? And according to Arizona law, there's nothing to prohibit giving a person a tattoo if they're intoxicated. Simply in Arizona, the person has to be over 18 and they have to sign release forms or have parental signatures if they're under 18 years of age. So Artie clearly did not break Arizona law. Also, it stipulates that tattoo artists have to exhibit duty of care. Now, duty of care means that a person acts with watchfulness, attention, caution, and prudence that a reasonable person in circumstances would use. If a person's actions do not meet this standard of care, then the actions are considered negligent, and any damages resulting may be claimed in a lawsuit for negligence. So whereas Artie was legally covered, in other words, he couldn't be arrested for doing this, he might have been in violation of duty and care, which means that she could sue him and a judge could require him to pay the $5,000. Now, beyond duty of care, we have to know what it means to be negligent, because remember it says that if you don't exhibit duty of care, then you are negligent. And that defines, our legal system defines negligence as the failure to exercise the care toward others which a reasonable or prudent person would do in the same or similar circumstances. So in this particular situation, you need to put yourself in Artie's place and ask yourself, would you have behaved in the same way? Now, that's what most of my students do, and that's why we get on such widely divergent perspectives. Some people said I would never give that person a tattoo. Somebody else said, hey, they signed the release forms. I certainly would. But that's the definition of negligent. An even more important term, however, is the term intoxicated. Now, we have been talking a lot about intoxication and drunkenness, and it's important that you understand the difference, especially moving into this next assignment. Drunkenness refers to a person's behavior. How are they acting that would indicate that they are intoxicated, that they have had more than just a mild level of alcohol? Intoxication indicates the physical effects and the mental impairment. And if you notice, I'm just going to take a sidestep and talk about Brock Turner Chanel Miller for a moment. If you notice here in this circle area, this is actually where Chanel Miller was on the intoxication level. But much of this, we don't know if we can't do blood alcohol levels. So had she woke up the following morning, had there not been witnesses, and she had actually woken up the following morning not remembering anything, nobody would have been able to really say for sure that she had been intoxicated because they wouldn't have her blood alcohol levels. Or was the person seen vomiting? Was there a loss of consciousness? Obviously, at the time, because of the witnesses, we know that there was a loss of consciousness, but had the witnesses not been there, we wouldn't have known that. So drunkenness, on the other hand, might be, speech and memory, coordination, balance impaired, problems with driving skills, moderate memory impairment, sleepiness can begin, that sort of thing. But I think that you're aware, if reading from, if nothing else, people who are heavily intoxicated may not exhibit drunkenness. And people who have high levels of drunkenness may not be seriously intoxicated. At the level of where sleepiness can begin, which is right down here, I'm fully cognizant of what's going on. I fully know everything, but I have very poor coordination and balance, and I slur my speech. I can do that on a glass of wine, actually. I'm an extreme lightweight, so I know that. I am in no way impaired as far as my cognitive ability is concerned, and I will not even suffer a hangover the next morning, but I need to be wearing flat shoes. So these two things don't coordinate very well, and that was the point that Fromm was making. So if we were going to evaluate Artie and see whether or not he had to pay the $5,000, we need to answer the question, did Artie know that Arta was too intoxicated to request a tattoo that night? And in order to draw the conclusion to answer yes or no, we have to answer some questions. The first question is, was it unusual for intoxicated customers to come into the shop and ask for tattoos? Well, I think the answer to that would have to be no. The location and the hours of the shop were set to capitalize on the fact that people would want to get a tattoo when they come in, if they've had a little liquid courage, or it makes it comfortable for them if they're afraid to get a tattoo to go down and have a few drinks and then to come back. Was it unusual for customers, sober or intoxicated, to ask for crazy tattoos? Well, I would guess that the answer to that would be no. I think that that's probably pretty commonplace for tattoo artists. Did Arta give Artie consent, verbal or nonverbal, that she wanted the tattoo that he provided? Well, yes. She came in, she asked for the tattoo, she told him exactly what she wanted, and she signed the release forms. Was the action witnessed by other people, and what were their responses? Well, she came in with a group of girlfriends. None of them said, you probably should not do this. This is not a good idea. Why don't you pick another tattoo? In fact, they told her that they encouraged her to get the tattoo. Did Artie know the extent of Arta's intoxication? Now, remember that he can only judge on her drunkenness, and the details don't really tell us anything about her slurring her words, her stumbling, her not being able to sign release forms, her falling asleep, her being unconscious, and he doesn't have a breathalyzer. So he would have to look at how she behaves, and he wasn't partying with her. He has no way of knowing how many drinks she had. Did she have 1 drink? Did she have 15 drinks? Was she a lightweight and after 2 drinks she can't be trusted, or can she drink 15 drinks and still know what's going on? He has no way of knowing that. And finally, was it possible that Arta looked like she knew what she was doing but didn't? And the answer to that is yes, because according to Fromm's research, people can behave in a perfectly normal ways and even sign contracts and be in a blackout phase. Behavior is not always an indicator of how much a person understands or what their cognizant processes are. So you have to, if we look at all of these and we answer these questions, then we have to determine that Artie was not negligent. So let's assume you're going to write an argument and you're going to answer the question, was he negligent when he gave her the tattoo? And you're going to build your argument around the answers to the questions that you ask. Now you have multiple questions, so you could potentially write an entire essay. Let's say that you were going to write a short paragraph, so you're going to have 2 or 3 reasons in the paragraph. And one of the reasons that I would want to focus on was, did Artie know the extent of Arta's intoxication? Because that's really sort of the crux of the whole issue. If he knew that she was not just drunk, but intoxicated, she had no idea what she was doing, then he was indeed negligent. So I would start by saying no. Artie was not negligent in giving Arta the tattoo that she was asked for. And my first conclusion would be, first of all, he may have known she was under the influence of alcohol, but he did not know she was too intoxicated to know what she was doing. And I want to stop there and underline that concept. When we say that a person cannot give consent under the influence of alcohol, it doesn't say under the influence of alcohol. It says if you are intoxicated or incapacitated. So, in other words, there's nothing wrong with having 1 drink and signing a contract. What you cannot be is incapacitated by the alcohol. The problem is, since it is so difficult to tell when a person is truly incapacitated, that we tend to default to, if you've had 1 drink, you're too drunk. And that is really what's happened with the whole sexual assault and consent thing. If a woman has had 1 or 2 drinks, she cannot give consent. You just default to that because it's so difficult to prove the other side. Okay, so he didn't know she was too intoxicated. First of all, give me some details or evidence. Artie was not partying with Arta and her friends that night, and he had no way of knowing how much she had to drink. He also did not know Arta well, so he had no way of knowing how she acted when she was drunk. Most importantly, Arta signed the release forms. Legally, if a person is able to sign release forms, then they are not intoxicated. In order to be negligent, Artie would have had to knowingly tattoo a woman who was not in her right mind. Since nothing about Arta's behavior signaled that she was drunk to the point of intoxication, Artie was not negligent. And then I might go to another one where I talked about how she gave consent. Secondly, Arta gave clear consent. And then I would talk about what she did there, and so forth. Okay, so what does this mean for the summative assignment that you're going to be doing? How does this help us answer the question, was it possible that Brock Turner thought that he had Chanel Miller's consent? Okay, keep in mind that when we're talking about consent here, that legally we default to she had alcohol in her system. But the law actually says is intoxicated or incapacitated. Keep in mind that she absolutely was intoxicated or incapacitated. If nothing else, we know this because of the blood alcohol. So legally, Brock Turner was guilty. No matter what his intent was, he was guilty. But it matters to Persky and to others on whether or not he thought that he had Miller's consent. Because if he thought she had consent, that changes things. Okay? So in order to be able to answer that question, you're going to have to consider some additional questions. You're going to have to consider, was it unusual for people at fraternity parties to exhibit drunken behavior? In Turner's worldview, would he have expected that? Was it unusual for people at fraternity parties to engage in hookup behavior? Once again, was that, if it's not unusual, then that is Turner's worldview. If it was unusual, that puts a totally different complexion on things. Did Miller give Turner consent, verbal or nonverbal, that she was willing to hook up with him? Was the interaction between Miller and Turner witnessed by other people? What was their response to the action? Now, not by the witnesses necessarily. I need you to think about, was it witnessed prior to when they were caught? Did Turner know the extent of Miller's intoxication? Did he know how much she had had to drink? Was it possible that Miller looked like she knew what she was doing but didn't? And then one question that sort of underlines it all that I want you to consider, perhaps not address in your paragraph, but consider, when did Miller pass out? Go back and look at what the witnesses said. The two graduate students said when they witnessed the occurrence. Because is it possible that Turner wasn't interacting with an unconscious woman until the very, very last minute? Is that a possibility? Now, depending on how you answer those questions, that's going to draw you to your conclusion. And remember that you're going to build your reasons around answers to the questions that were asked above. Remember that you also have to offer evidence of the answer to those questions and why it means that he thought that she had consent. For example, if you say that it was usual, it was commonplace for people at fraternity parties to get extremely drunk and engage in hookup behavior, then it is likely that by getting drunk and being willing to interact with him, Miller was giving nonverbal consent. On the other hand, if it is rare that this happens, then Brock Turner couldn't have possibly thought that Chanel Miller was giving consent. I also want to point out that I have linked an interesting article in the assignment that you might find very helpful to use in addition to Fromm and the probation report. It's a very sort of eye-opening article. All right, good luck.